The Islanders face the Sharks tonight. We have a full preview. Plus, we'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of the offense opening up a little bit and what it means for the team going forward. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could be with us today and be part of the Locked On Islanders family. And thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Lots to get to on today's show, including a preview of tonight's game against the Sharks. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question for us, a comment about something we've discussed, or a topic you'd like us to talk about on a future episode of the show, feel free to send us an email. The email address, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. You could also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings throughout the entire season. Trade rumors, injury updates, lineup moves, who's going to and from Bridgeport. If you name it, we've got it right here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. So, the big thing, the Islanders don't have very many 7-goal games like they did on Saturday night against the Anaheim Ducks. And, at the same time, the key in this one was that the Islanders were able to get their defensemen more involved in the attack. And we know that during the, offseason and during training camp and the preseason, Lane Lambert was stressing that having the defensemen be a little bit more involved in the game is, offensively, is a good thing, something that he would like without sacrificing defense. So far, through 2 games, and again, we're talking about 141st of the season. So not a lot of, sample size here. But so far, it seems to be working because if you look at it, through the first 2 games, the Islanders have given up a grand total of 4 goals. That places them 6th in the league. Now, again, even the game that they lost, they lose by a score of 3-1, and so you give up 4 goals in 2 games. That's pretty darn solid. And at the same time, they are able to score 8. And look, say what you want about the Anaheim Ducks. They're not a great team yet. They are still in the rebuilding stages. But the Anaheim Ducks have some pretty dangerous offensive weapons. And, Trevor Zegras being Troy Terry, those are the 2 that come to mind first. But they've got some players who, if you make a defensive mistake, they will put the puck in the net. And the fact that the Islanders were able to get 5 goals from defensemen and get only 1 goal against in the entire game, that's pretty darn good when you put it all together. And, even the 3-1 loss to Florida, the offense wasn't necessarily there, but they only gave up 2 goals plus an empty netter. So we're not talking about a situation where, the defense hasn't been there. The key for the Islanders, though, is to continue to get that extra little bit of offense with the defensemen taking what I would call calculated chances. Keep getting that without sacrificing too much defense, because we all know that this Islanders team essentially can't afford to give up too many goals at this point, because the 7-goal games, they're going to be few and far between overall. Now, another thing that we definitely want to talk about is the penalty kill. So far, the penalty kill, a perfect 9 for 9. Now, again, 2 games. Not going to sit here and say, wow, this is the best penalty kill in the NHL. But I will say this. It's off to a darn good start. And there are a lot of experienced penalty killers on this team. I mean, Pelech and Pulock, always defensively, going to get the job done. Up front, you've got Clutterbuck and Cizikas and Zach Parise, who definitely has penalty killing ability. J.G. Pajot can always contribute on the PK. You have got, 5 or 6 solid forwards, but those would probably be the top 4 who can come in and kill off penalties. And again, Florida and Anaheim both have some very talented power play players who, if you give them that little bit of extra space, they can really do damage. And the fact that the Islanders have been perfect on the PK so far, including a 5-on-3 that lasted 1 minute and 14 seconds against the Ducks, that is an extremely encouraging thing for the New York Islanders. And it's something they really, really need to keep up. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out, you look at the shots on goal. Out of the top 5 players in shots on goal, 3 of them, well, let's say 6, because 2 players are tied for 5th. But through 2 games, 3 of the top 5 players in shots on goal are defensemen. Noah Dobson has 8 shots. That leads all players. Ryan Pulock has 7, and Scotty Mayfield has 5. Robin Salo has 4. So you see the defenseman and Salo not getting as much ice time as some of these other guys. The defensemen are getting into the play, and it is showing. And I think overall, the team is showing a little bit more of a we want to shoot the puck kind of a mentality. That is important. It's, to me, what it shows is that Lane Lambert was able to come in to this team, take over the team, watch the film from last year. Look, he was on the coaching staff last year, but he was able to examine this team and really, really say, this is what we need to work on, and this is what we're going to do to try to fix this situation. And guess what? They did. So very, very impressive. A good little piece of coaching there, and encouraging signs early on from your New York Islanders. When we come back, we have an email question from a listener, plus we will preview tonight's game at the UBS Arena against the San Jose Sharks, and our Islanders' birthday today, a 4-time Stanley Cup winner with the Islanders, who also won a gold medal for the United States. Let's see if you can guess who that is. Shouldn't be too hard. All that still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and like all Built Bars, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. It's all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar, and grab yourself a Built bar. Go to Built.com, use a promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON15. LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. So the Islanders will be facing the San Jose Sharks tonight. But before we get to that, want to get to our question of the day. And this one comes from Gail in White Plains. And Gail writes, when I went to the UBS Arena, I enjoyed looking at the banners for the 8 retired numbers: Dennis Potvin, Clark Gillies, Brian Trottier, Mike Bossy, Bobby Nystrom, John Tonelli, Billy Smith, and Butch Goring. What seemed to be missing was the number 1 for Glenn Chico Resch. Having been a season ticket holder through the Islander dynasty years, I recollect that Chico was usually the starting goalie at the time they were winning Stanley Cups. I'm curious how it is that Billy Smith got the retired number, but not Chico Resch. Well, Gail, thank you so much for the email. It's a good question, and I will answer it this way. Chico Resch was an outstanding goaltender for the New York Islanders. And, you know, he really started to make his mark in 74-75. And he played 12 playoff games for the Islanders that year, led them on that miraculous run to the Stanley Cup semifinals, where they beat the Rangers in the preliminary round in overtime, beat the Penguins after being down 3-0 in the series, won 4 straight, won Game 7 1-0, and then fell behind to the defending Stanley Cup champion Flyers 3-0, won 3 straight before losing the 7th game at the Spectrum in Philadelphia after Kate Smith sang "God Bless America." But the thing is this: Chico Resch was a member of the New York Islanders for only one of their 4 Stanley Cup years, at least in the playoffs. And that was 79-80. And, you know, Chico was splitting time with Billy Smith throughout 75-6, 76-77, 77-78, 78-79, and 79-80. And then toward the end of the 80-81 season, the Islanders traded Chico to the Colorado Rockies, who later became the New Jersey Devils, at late in the season, and they promoted Roland Melanson to be the backup goalie. The point is that Chico has 1 Stanley Cup ring with the New York Islanders, and he played in 4 playoff games that year with the Isles. It was Billy Smith who was the goaltender in most of the playoff games, and who really sort of was more of the clutch goaltender, not to take anything away from Chico, because he was extremely, extremely clutch in his own way. We talked about what he did in the 75 playoffs, for example. But at the end of the day, it was Billy Smith who was the goalie longer, stayed with the Islanders from their very first season all the way to the late 80s, and who really played more games in the playoffs when they were winning Stanley Cups. So the last playoff game that Chico Resch played in, he played 20 minutes in a playoff game in the Stanley Cup Finals against the Flyers in 1980. That was his last Islanders playoff game. He was in goal a lot in the 79 series against the Rangers, which the Islanders lost. And he was in goal against Toronto in 78 in that tough opening round 7-game series quarterfinal round that the Islanders lost. So that's why Chico isn't there. And I think another reason is this. After Chico went to Colorado and then to New Jersey and Philadelphia, he went on to become a broadcaster with the Devils. And I think a lot of younger Islander fans, rightly or wrongly, associate Chico Resch with the New Jersey Devils. And, if you were an Islander fan in the 70s and 80s, you knew Chico and what a big part he played in getting the Islanders to become Stanley Cup contenders. But because it was Billy Smith, who was the goalie for the 4 Stanley Cup years and beyond, he's up in the rafters. And Chico, while an all-time great Islander, has not had his number retired. So that's the story. Gail, thank you so much for the email. Now, Sharks tonight against the Islanders. San Jose, they started the season early, played 2 games against the Nashville Predators in Prague, but they've played 4 games and they are 0-4. Not a good start, to say the least, for the Sharks. They lost the 2 games to Nashville, lost at home against Carolina and Chicago. And in these 4 games, they have scored a grand total of 6 goals. No player has more than 1 goal right now through 4 games on this team. Erik Karlsson leads the team with a goal and 2 assists, so he has 3 points. So does Mario Ferraro. But other than that, they're not getting the goal scoring, and their defense has been inconsistent, to say the least. This is a team, when you add the fact that they're traveling from California to New York, start of a pretty lengthy road trip, that they are really just starting out a long rebuilding period. This is not expected to be one of the better teams in this league this year. In fact, the host of J.D. Young, the host of Locked On Sharks, said this team might even be really bad now that they're off to the 0-4 start. The line combinations for the Sharks: Tomas Hertl, centers Timo Meier and Luke Kunin on the top line. That's a dangerous top line. We've talked about Meier as a possible Islanders trade target if the Sharks look to move him later on this year. Second line, Logan Couture, center Steven Lorentz and Kevin LeBlanc. Nick Bonino is the third line pivot, with Oscar Lindblom to his left, Matthew Nieto to his right, and Nico Sturm centers Yona Gadjevich and Evgeny Svechnikov on the fourth line. The defensive pairings, Jacob Megna and Erik Karlsson are the top pairing. Karlsson, by far their best offensive defenseman. Matt Benning and Pickles, Mark-Edward Vlasic, are the second pair, and Mario Ferraro and Radim Simek are the third pair. The goaltending duo, it's either Capo Kakinen or James Reimer. Right now, it is Reimer who's playing better. He is a 2.56 goals against average and a 9.24 save percentage. Kakinen, a 4.10 goals against average and an 8.14 save percentage. They have been alternating games. They've each played 2 games. It was Kakinen who went in the last game against Chicago, so we're probably going to face Reimer. The penalty kill for San Jose has been perfect, just like the Islanders, which is a surprise when you're 0-4. The power play, however, only hitting at 6.3%. Again, we're early in the season, but that ranks them 26th, and the Sharks are 30th in the league in shooting percentage, scoring at only 5.5% of their shots on goal. Should be a good game tonight. Islanders with a chance to really build on their win over Anaheim. And, theoretically, this is a game that they should and hopefully will find a way to win. We've got more to get to on today's show. We've got our Islanders birthday of the day and a whole lot more. But first, thanks for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now make your second listen game-to-game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game from across the National Hockey League with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. Yesterday was the 66th birthday of former Islanders defenseman and Miracle on Ice defenseman Ken Morrow. Morrow, a native of Flint, Michigan, drafted by the Islanders back in 1976 in the 4th round, 68th overall, and spent 4 years at Bowling Green State University, then was on the U.S. Olympic team that beat the Russians and won gold medal at Lake Placid, part of the Miracle on Ice. Joined the Islanders after the Olympics and won a Stanley Cup, becoming the first player in NHL history to win an Olympic gold medal and a Stanley Cup in the same season, and stayed with the Islanders until the 88-89 season when a knee injury forced him to retire, and it cut his career short. He only played 550 career NHL games, a very physical and steady defenseman, but not a big point producer, never scored more than 19 points or 5 goals in any NHL season. 17 career goals in those 550 games, 105 points, 309 penalty minutes. But here's the thing. He played 127 playoff games, all with the Islanders. 11 goals, 33 points, and 97 penalty minutes. Ken Morrow lifted his game when the stakes were highest. We go back and look at one of his better games with the Islanders, and of course, it is a playoff game. April 20th, 1981, at the Northlands Coliseum in Edmonton, Islanders and Oilers. Roland Melanson, the goalie for the Isles. Andy Moog in between the pipes for the Oilers. So many Hall of Famers in this game. And it was the Oilers getting on the board first. This is, by the way, game 4 of this series. Islanders entering the game with a 2-1 series lead and a chance to take command of the series in Edmonton. Oilers got on the board first. Clark Gilly sent off for holding, and Paul Coffey scores his 4th of the playoffs unassisted on the power play at 3:02. And then a little more than 2 minutes later, Yari Curry, another Hall of Famer, his 5th from Wayne Gretzky and Gary Lavrier at 5:19. Isles down by 2, but the Islanders rebound. Paul Coffey sent off for cross-checking, and Dennis Potvin, his 6th from Mike Bossy and Bob Bourne at 7:57, makes it 2-1. And later in the period, Bobby Nystrom, his 2nd of the playoffs, John Tonelli and Wayne Merrick with the helpers at 16:11. Islanders tie it up at 2 after 1 period. In the second, the Islanders power play gets to work. Glenn Anderson off for tripping. Brian Trottier cashes in for the Isles. His 8th from Mike Bossy makes it 3-2. But a little less than 2 minutes later, Mark Messier ties it for Edmonton. His 1st from Doug Hicks at 10:46. 3-3 hockey game. John Tonelli makes it 4-3 Isles at the 13:52 mark of the second period. His 2nd of the playoffs. Gordy Lane with the assist, and the Isles lead 4-3 after 40 minutes. But in the third, Gord Lane heads off for tripping, and Brett Callaghan makes it a 4-4 game, his 3rd of the playoffs. Glenn Anderson and Wayne Gretzky with the assist at 7 minutes even. The game goes to overtime. And who gets the winner? The clutch man himself, our Islanders' birthday of the day, Kenny Morrow, his 1st of the playoffs at 5:41, an unassisted overtime playoff winner. And the Islanders skate away with a 5-4 overtime road playoff win, beating Wayne Gretzky and the Oilers and taking a 3-1 lead in the series. They would end up winning in 6 games. For Ken Morrow, a playoff overtime game winner, of course, his most famous playoff overtime game winner coming in game 5 of that preliminary series in 1983 against 84, against the New York Rangers that eliminated the Rangers in what was probably the best game in the history of the rivalry. So Kenny Morrow, soft-spoken, physical, big, great defensive defenseman, nice guy. Interviewed him for my book, and he was always generous with his time and his memories, and working still for the Islanders organization. So happy birthday, a day late now, to Kenny Morrow. He is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Before we get going, just wanted to mention one other thing. Michael Dal Cole, who the Islanders did not re-sign this offseason. He had a PTO with the Ottawa Senators, did not get a contract from them, ends up signing now with a team in Finland, Turan Pallisaari. I hope I'm even coming close to that. I cannot pretend that I speak any real Finnish, but TPS is the nickname of the team or the abbreviation for the team. So Michael Dalcol off to Finland to hopefully rejuvenate his career and get back on track. And we certainly wish him all the best in that. Thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone bring you the fantasy edge and keep you ahead of the competition with daily updates of news, analysis, and advice Monday through Friday. It's available on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it for us. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have our key takeaways and analysis from tonight's game against the Sharks and a whole lot more. We'll also have our first farm report of the year. So make sure you join us for that busy show coming up tomorrow. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.